We gathered a small group of friends around us to support us and to advocate for marriage equality while our court case was being prepared.
Today, as part of the ShoutOut interview series, we're speaking to Katherine Zappone, who's a former senator and Minister for Children. Katherine's legal challenges that she took with her wife, Ann Louise Gilligan, helped pave the way for the same-sex marriage referendum in 2015. So Katherine, thank you so much for joining us today all the way from New York. We're delighted to have you.
It's just a great pleasure, and it's a beautiful spring morning here. Daffodils, tulips, and it makes me miss a little bit what's going on in Ireland.
I'm sure New York's a lot more exciting than Ireland at the minute, so you're not missing much, don't worry. So Katherine, you have been involved in the gay rights movement for many years. Can you tell us how you first became involved?
I suppose my involvement began, my involvement was initiated by, once upon a time in the early 80s, starting a doctoral program in Boston College. And the other person who was in my course was this extraordinarily gorgeous woman called Ann Louise Gilligan.
In meeting Katherine, I was surprised by love.
You were surprised, ambushed?
Well, I was really so overcome that I suddenly had met somebody that I could know without hesitation that I could spend the rest of my life with them.
I suppose you could say we pretty much fell in love on the spot. But we were studying in a Catholic university and all of that kind of stuff. But we still managed to eventually make a commitment to become life partners again in the early 80s. And she said, would you like to come back with me to Ireland? And I said, sure, but as long as we come back to the United States, which of course never happened because you Irish just adore your country. Came in the 80s, was involved, and both of us were teaching at university. And we were working in the field of religion. And as many of your, I hope viewers would be aware, or listeners, that, those were dark days for LGBT people. The Catholic Church was not fond of us. Most people stayed in rather than came out, including ourselves, because our livelihoods depended on not being out. Having said that, we weren't part of the LGBT gay lesbian rights movement until early 2000, which isn't that long ago. And why did we do it then? Well, we had been, doing a lot of other justice work, especially for women and their children in the Tella area who didn't have the same kind of educational opportunities as we did. We set up a community education organization that's still going to this day for them. And so we felt that kind of suited our desire to bring about change. But in early 2000, we became aware of ways in which we were particularly discriminated against in light of just different issues. And we decided then that enough was enough. We came to a point where we wanted our life partnership recognized in law. We had been life partners for 20 years. And so we started talking to friends about, that this is something that we wanted to do and would they join us? And most of the people that we talked to really weren't that interested, particularly because we said that, we weren't really interested in civil partnership, that we wanted marriage. And what was going on throughout other countries at the time, if states or countries were looking for marriage equality, usually there were lots of couples who challenged the state together. We could not find one couple to do that with us. So instead, we decided to do it on our own. Around the time, Canada in Vancouver opened its gates for LGBT people. You didn't have to be a citizen or resident, but you could go and get married there. We did that. We got married in 2003. We came back to Ireland and we wrote to the Revenue Commissioner and we said, would you please recognize our marital status in light of our taxes? And he or she wrote back and said, dear ladies, no. So it was on that basis that we began a major high court case to challenge that no, and to say, yes, we ought to be included in our Constitution. We knew that it was going to be a long journey. We gathered a small group of friends around us to support us and to advocate for marriage equality while our court case was being prepared. That organization was formed called Marriage Equality, 2002, 2003, and with the one single objective was to get marriage equality. So over the years, we continued through the courts. They're very slow. Anyhow, eventually it was decided that there would be a referendum put to the people instead, not to get this sorted in the courts. And it was at that stage Marriage Equality joined forces with the Irish Council of Civil Liberties and also Glen National Organization, LGBT National Organization at the time, in order to form the campaign called Yes Equality, out of which in 1 year later, we achieved that. What I want to emphasize, though, such significant change often takes a wee bit of time. And secondly, what we really are proud of is that spark for the marriage equality movement in Ireland came because of love, because of our love affair and our commitment to one another and the gathering together of the people who are willing to support us. And I really think and believe, and even as a politician, is that the more we can find ways in which love and generosity and kindness impact what it is that we do and the kind of good things that we seek, the more successful we will be.
That's amazing, Katherine. Thank you for sharing that. When you first began those legal challenges back in the early 90s, as you say, what challenges did you and Ann Louise face yourselves?
Well, we could have lost our jobs, and particularly Ann Louise, because she was working in a university context or a college setting where the Archbishop of Dublin was the manager. She could have been fired on the spot. At least that did not happen, but that's the kind of, that's what we were up against.
Bit different here, I would suspect, in the 80s.
Well, we weren't that open about the relationship in Boston either. It wasn't, although United States of America, the fact that we were in Boston College, that we were studying theology, and Louise was coming back to teach theology in Ireland. So we had to be, we felt we needed to be quite careful then too. But coming back here, yes, it was another thing altogether.
At the same time, we just believed that, again, it was time. We were privileged enough. We had a lot of education. We were middle class. We were, kind of just normal looking ladies. And we looked like them. We looked like those who were in power. That was frankly the biggest challenge. But the other thing I want to say is that it's what we really wanted. Of course, we wanted justice for ourselves. But our second major motivation was that we could be part of a movement that would create a sense of welcome and warmth and embrace, especially for young LGBT people, so that they would not be afraid to discover who they are, that they would be able and willing to share that with friends and family, and that they would know then it was okay to become the beautiful self that they are. That was our prime motivation. That was equal to looking for justice for ourselves.
You mentioned young people there. You were Minister for Children. Is that your full title?
Yes, that's correct. I sure was.
Yeah. So what challenges do you think young LGBTQA people still face in Ireland today?
Well, I was very proud as Minister for Children to actually invite an extraordinary youngish woman called Una Mullally, one of our great journalists, to chair the putting together of the world first ever National LGBT plus Youth Strategy. And in that context, we talked to young people all over the country in lots of different ways and put together a piece of actions over the next number of years. It's still being rolled out that countered, I think, especially the bullying that young people face in schools, that countered the lack of services or places to gather, again, for young people who are trying to come to understand if it's okay to be gay and lesbian, especially in the rural settings. And that also found ways to encourage the celebration of our in one sense, I was going to say minority sexual identity, but honestly, sometimes I wonder, is it really that minor anymore? It's so cool to be gay and lesbian in Ireland now. I mean, it just gives me such great pleasure. So there are just, there's a whole set of actions that are rolling out, but I think it's especially about like for young people where with their families, that their parents can feel, yeah, that's cool. And that they don't have to be afraid that it's going to be a rough ride for them, mothers and fathers. Like my parents were, that was the only thing they worried about when I told them. And I was 33 when I came out to them. And I wrote a letter. I was there in Ireland, and I wrote a letter and I sent it across the water to Seattle, Washington, and I prayed that it would land okay. But anyhow, so that we would create a culture where parents wouldn't have to be afraid anymore for their young people. And where's the next place that you spend most of your time? In schools. And particularly, and we know it's still the case that, the majority of school settings are run by the Catholic Church or Catholic orders or whatever. But I really do believe, and I feel very proud that even those settings are starting to have some more gentleness and willingness to embrace. But there's still a long way to go.
I like what you said there about the letter. I actually wrote a letter to my father, but I just left it in the bedside locker and then snuck back to Dublin. So I didn't have to post it, but he saw it 4 hours later. But, letters are a good way.
They are.
What would you say to any young people out there in Ireland today who are still struggling to accept their gender identity, their sexuality? What would you say to them?
The first thing I would say is that I understand. I know what it's like to feel shame. But I also know that there are people out there, and hopefully some of those people are your family who you can talk to share your concerns and your worries. But there's also services that are now available, especially through LGBT Ireland, and friends and family. So don't feel alone. Believe in the beautiful self that you can be. And the other thing I would say too is that we need a lot of acts of kindness. First of all, to be kind to yourself. You're just a beautiful person. And secondly, to be kind to others. And if we create that kind of culture and environment, the world is going to be a great place.
Indeed. I just want to take you back a second there. There's an amazing clip of when you were in Dublin Castle when the day the marriage equality was passing.
Today, in this new Ireland, Ann Louise Gilligan, will you marry me?
Oh, that's where is she? Bring Ann Louise on. Yeah.
How did you feel at that moment? What was it like being there on that day?
It was the most extraordinary moment of both of our lives. To finally be able to express not only our forever love openly, but to do it in a way that we knew would be sealed by the law because the people had voted for us.
Beautiful. I know you got married to Ann Louise in 2016, I believe, and then she sadly passed away in 2017. Yes. And yes. I suppose you've both been in such a journey together. And I suppose it was so nice to have that, be recognised by the Irish state. Obviously before she passed away, it must have been such an important.
It was extraordinary. Thank you. And that we had that celebration in Dublin, the City Hall. And we had our president and other members of cabinet. It was extraordinary. I'm writing a book now about that period. And one of the questions I asked is, why, after such a long time, to get there, to get that victory, was our time so short after that? But my answer is that, we just had an amazing love affair and relationship for 35 years. Even in the context of a more closed Ireland. So it's possible. And love conquers all.
Thank you, Katherine. And, that's a lovely way to leave it. Love conquers all. And I hope someday I'm as lucky to have what you and Ann Louise had. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you so much for all the work you've done.
Great. Thank you.
It's been fantastic and we really appreciate it.
All the best. Bye-bye.